Hello, everyone. Thank you all so much for coming to our workshop on the model minority myth and AAPI mental health. We are the API Roots outreach team of the Counseling Center paraprofessional program. So we focus on training in mental health skills, teaching about cultural identity to support cultural awareness, and advocating for social justice issues in the Asian American community. In our outreach, we want to support and empower AAPI students in their journey of identity exploration, academic pursuit, and professional development. We are CCPs, which means that we are trained in basic helping and facilitation skills to provide outreach and prevention services. However, we are not licensed professionals, so if you want more information, we would be more than happy to connect you to resources. That being said, my name is Zira Nandini. I'm a junior in developmental psychology.
Hello everyone, my name is Emmy Cornejo. I use he, they pronouns, and I am also a junior and majoring in clinical psychology.
Hi everyone, my name is Victoria Isabel Puksanghan. I go by she, her pronouns, and I'm also a junior majoring in clinical psychology.
So we would like to begin today by recognizing and acknowledging that we are on the lands of the Peoria, Kaskaskia, Piankashaw, Wea, Miami, Muscooten, Odawa, Sauk, Meskwaki, Kickapoo, Potawatomi, Ojibwe, and Chickasaw nations. Now, these lands were the traditional territory of these native nations prior to their forced removal. These lands continue to carry the stories of these nations and the struggles for survival. As a land-grant institution, the U of I has a particular responsibility to acknowledge the peoples of these lands, as well as the histories of dispossession that have allowed for the growth of this institution for the past 150 years. We are also obligated to reflect on and actively address these histories and the role that the university has played in shaping them. This acknowledgement and the Native peoples is a start as we move forward for the next 150 years. And here is an overview of what we will be touching on today. So we will define the model minority myth, discuss lived experiences with AAPI identities, touch on collectivist themes and values, learn about specific mental health outcomes within the AAPI community, and finally highlight the importance of cultural humility.
So to get started today, we wanted to leave you all with a question. You can either write this down on a piece of paper or just self-reflect. The question we have today is, what positive stereotypes have you heard about the AAPI community? And I would also like to preface that there will be a lot of these like self-reflection type questions throughout the video. So feel free to take out a piece of paper and write these down, type on your phone, or just reflect within yourself. And yeah, you can go ahead, pause the video and reflect on that and play whenever you're ready.
Now, to define the model minority myth, essentially it is based on the assumption that Asian Americans have achieved economic and academic success by working hard and following Asian cultural norms. To further elaborate, the model names Asian Americans as law-abiding, physically and mentally healthy, economically wealthy, and academically successful. This conception began in 1966 in the New York Times magazine article when social demographer and University of California, Berkeley professor William Peterson used the term model minority to describe who were increasing their social status financially as well as educationally through sheer effort. Since then, print media and television shows have perpetuated this stereotype. Model minority is a problem because it is assuming that Asian American communities are well off, are mentally healthy, are independent, when we often do have our own sorts of struggles, which are not recognized because of the model minority myth?
According to the definition that Dira just gave us, how have you possibly encountered the model minority myth in your daily life, whether you were personally affected or witness others be impacted by it? Yeah, and if you personally haven't been affected by it, have you heard about it in other contexts? Feel free again to pause the video. Um,
And another discussion or reflection question that we have are, what are some examples of your own biases / assumptions about the AAPI community? And feel free to pause and come back whenever you're ready.
So I will now go over the historical context of Asian Americans in relation to larger systems of power, privilege, and oppression, as well as racism and discrimination in the US. So to start off, the term model minority myth was coined in the 1960s during the civil rights movement to delegitimize the existence of racial inequality, particularly for the Black and Latinx communities. Like Dira said earlier, it described Asian Americans as moving ahead due to hard work, American dream, thus rationalizing that systemic racism couldn't exist and creating the myth of a meritocracy in America. And here is a timeline of anti-Asian discrimination and racism in the United States. So here we see the Chinese Exclusion Act in 1910, passed alien land laws, which prevented aliens eligible for citizenship, so Chinese and Japanese immigrants, from legally owning or land. We see the Johnson-Reed Act, Japanese internment in reaction to Pearl Harbor in 1942. In 1982, Vincent, a Chinese man, was beaten to death by two white auto workers who mistook him as Japanese man in the climate of anti-Japanese sentiments. 2001, the 9/11 led to hyper surveillance and policing of Muslim Americans, many of whom are South Asian, and now there's an alarming escalation of xenophobia, bigotry, and hate crimes resulting from the COVID-19 pandemic. So with all of that in mind, it's quite evident that Asian Americans have experienced oppression in this country.
So, thought question for what you just said. Do you have any personal experiences regarding your AAPI identities relating to stereotyping or racism? And if you don't have a personal experience, is there an experience that you know of, whether it be a family member, a friend, regarding their identities to AAPI and related to stereotyping or racism?
So moving on to the topic of collectivism. Collectivism is defined as the emphasis, or collectivist cultures are defined as the emphasis of the needs of the group as a whole over the needs or desires of an individual. Most Asian countries tend to have collectivist cultures prioritizing family, faith, and respecting elders. Some other traits of collectivist cultures include individuals define themselves in relation to others rather than themselves. Group loyalty is always encouraged. Decisions are made based on what's best for the group, and greater emphasis on the common goal rather than the individual goal. Most Asian countries tend to have collectivist cultures, again, prioritizing family, faith, and respecting elders, also known as filial piety. I mentioned this idea of face, which refers to one's social standing, reputation, and honor perceived by others. This is a concept that's very important in many Asian cultures. Parents tend to hold their children to much higher standards because they believe that their children's actions are a reflection of their actions and the entire family's actions. For example, in Western cultures, which are more individualistic, it may be common for independence to be seen as a good trait. But in Asian collectivist cultures, independence can kind of be seen as selfishness because, for example, in most Asian cultures, children are expected to keep living and giving back to their parents as they get older, and grandparents are expected to help take care of their grandchildren. Many times, if Asian children seek out mental health resources, Asian parents may feel that it's a bad look on their families because they're unable to help their own children and kind of see it as a failure amongst themselves, kind of going back to the idea that they hold their children to high standards because their actions are a reflection of their own.
So based on that, do you have any collectivist values as a result of your family or society? And again, some examples include the importance of family need, responsibility to others, group harmony, filial piety, things like that.
So, talking about some of the myths that we hear about the AAPI community, one of them being all Asians are naturally smart, good at math, science, and technology. The model minority myth makes it seem as if Asians don't need any extra help or assistance, which may not always be true because there's research that shows that's incorrect. For example, Southeast Asian communities, for example, only 35 to 40% of Hmong, Laotian, and Cambodian populations don't finish high school. I'm sorry, finish high school. And the second myth being all Asians are hardworking, obedient, and uncomplaining. Although Asians are naturally hardworking because of their different cultures, the model minority myth makes it seem as if they're always obedient, submissive, and willing to take on whatever is thrown at them. Again, that's not always true. In actuality, from 2007 to 2010, AAPIs had the highest share of long-term unemployment of any racial group. So looking at these myths, what are the dangers of these myths? First, being that it ignores the diversity within the AAPI community. It kind of perpetuates a stereotype that all Asians are the same and don't recognize the rich culture of different Asian countries. Second, it erases racism among Asian Americans, and as MB covered earlier, there's a long history of anti-Asian racism. And it kind of positions Asian Americans as the main beneficiaries of the American dream, making it seem like their lives are perfect, not recognizing the racism that they face on a daily basis. Third, it puts more pressure on Asian Americans to succeed because there are those stereotypes like Asians are always hardworking, always smart. But in reality, that's not always true, and it kind of puts this extra pressure academically or in work settings, etc., causing more stress and negative mental health in the API community.
Now, I'm going to underline the expressed mental health needs of Asian American young adults. According to a study, it was found that young Asian Americans tend not to seek professional help for their mental health problems. Instead, they use personal support networks, such as close friends, significant others, and the religious community. Participants suggested that Asian cultural norms that do not consider mental problems important and associated stigma of seeking professional care might undermine their mental health help seeking behavior. Their findings support a need for delivering culturally appropriate programs based on mental health and cultural training for health providers to deliver culturally appropriate care. There were 4 common sources of stress for AAPI young adults. Number 1 was pressure to meet parental expectations of high academic achievement and live up to the minority stereotype. Number 2 was the difficulty of balancing 2 different cultures and communicating with parents. Number 3 was family obligations based on the strong family values. And the last one was discrimination or isolation due to racial or cultural background. Based on the literature and everything that we have discussed thus far, there is a stigma surrounding therapy seeking for AAPI individuals and an overall underutilization of clinical services. Statistically, about 70% of Asian Americans have never received psychotherapy, and additionally, suicide is the second leading cause of death among Asian Americans.
So due to, social stigmatization, maybe feelings of shame and guilt, what are some difficult conversations you have had with friends or family members about mental health, particularly when it comes to the Asian American community? And I'm now going to cover one of our last topics for this workshop, cultural humility. According to the APA, this is a tool and a philosophy that consists of an awareness of one's own limitations to understanding another's cultural background and experience and their identities. So there are four main components. The one is self-reflection, so doing that self-work, that introspection to gain more self-awareness, again, about maybe your own biases, assumptions, and stereotypes. Second one is lifelong learning, acknowledging that there's always room for growth and you can always learn about other cultures and backgrounds. The third one is empathy and compassion, just gaining a better understanding of others. And the fourth one, again, tied to that third one, is being other oriented rather than self focused. Yeah, and again, oh, and for some of you, you might have heard of cultural competence before. So, with that, basically, that's sort of the information that you gain about other cultures, other people, and their sort of traditions and customs. But cultural humility is almost taking it a step further and recognizing that you might not know everything. Again, tying in with that lifelong learning, and you can always keep learning and trying to understand others better. Yeah, so here's the contact information for the Counseling Center, our website, our phone number, and all of the social media platforms that we are on. Yeah.
And yeah, we just want to say thank you so much for watching our video. Please feel free to reach out to the Counseling Center with any questions that you have.
Bye, everyone.